I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Actually, that's not where it's. I want to start with where I wanted to end. I want to remind everybody or encourage everybody that this discussion I'm having here is part of an ongoing long form project. I'm going to build and produce at some point, titled "Not a Different World." HBCUs, Not a Different World. And which is going to include my full experience and story, but I want to put it in the context of many others. So it's not just me whining and complaining, but also putting it into more context, because some of it is, particular to me, and my attitude and behavior and politics. It's not all just, and it could be argued that in not in all instances was my behavior the best suited for what I want as an outcome. I'll put it that way. I wouldn't say I was wrong, but tactically, and then I do like for people to. I only like for people to be reminded that it's doctor because I'm still paying for it. That's why. That's my own joke. But okay, so I want to invite people. I'm going to have at iMixWhatILike.org. I think I'm freezing up again, at iMixWhatILike.org. Shortly after this show ends, there will be, and in perpetuity going forward, there will be a link that I'm going to have there for folks that I'm inviting you to catch on to, and I will continue going forward. Invite people to catch on to link on to. To submit your story, your version of your experience, whether you were student, staff, faculty, admin, parent of an HBCU student. I want to hear from you and engage in some dialogue. So I have a form of questions, a questionnaire, so to speak, that you can fill out, and we can begin. I would like to, you can be anonymous if you like. In other words, I want to have, and already the stories and interviews I've done and collected are fascinating. And the point being, at least initially, one of the questions, for instance, to what extent did the TV show A Different World influence your engagement with the HBCU, however you engage as a faculty, student, admin, parent, etc.? Did it not? Or if not that, because of, maybe a generational difference, was it any other pop cultural reference that encouraged you? Or was it the familial thing? I'm a daughter or a son or a family member of an HBCU, and then, of course, we'll bring in some of the academic. We'll get to that in a little bit here, but some of the literature about the HBCUs, and then try to put this together to give a more honest and accurate discussion of what goes on there. So for me, I won't go into too much detail now, but the crux for me around Not a Different World is that for many, the idea of the HBCU is that it is a different world, that it is, it's not the PWI, or predominantly white institutional experience. It is where Black people can get culture, and I think in an often misunderstood way, can get radical, inspirational preparation for the world. And that's not historically what HBCUs have been here to do, and I don't think that's their function today.
Nope.
And that many of us toil there, particularly as faculty, but also as staff, admin, etc. Underneath that mythology, without the reality of our experiences being much known or understood. So let me invite you, Kaba, to jump in initially with any first thoughts, but then I want to get to this article that came out in the Chronicle of Higher Education as another jumping off point for this discussion.
No, just real quick. I mean, in terms of HBCUs, I went to one. I didn't go right out of high school, but I definitely was influenced by A Different World, which was airing while I was in high school for the most part, and ended after I had already graduated. But it was certainly influential in my going to an HBCU. I had already started kind of on this journey, being African centered and all of that. And I talked about that ad nauseum here and other places. But so I went there with a certain expectation that, you know, there would be a certain level of politics, a certain level of consciousness there. And of course, I went to like one of the most snooty, you know, bougie HBCUs that actually Hillman was based on, which I didn't know at the time. But Hillman was actually based on Hampton University in Virginia. It was a school supposedly in Virginia. It was based on Hampton. And I didn't realize that. I had never even been to Hampton. Neither one of my parents had gone to college. I have an older sister. She went for a few years, didn't complete college. So I didn't have a lineage of people going to college. There was not a tradition of going to college. I always joke and say my father got a full ride to the University of Vietnam for 2 tours. So it's just a blessing that I'm even here. But
about that, yeah.
But
really,
but you know, but there was that. But so my expectations of going to an HBCU were that it was going to be, you know, black, like black politically, and I was in for a rude awakening. But the flip side of that was I was able to sharpen my sword in my arguments because I knew that I was going to have to come ready to. I couldn't just come in there with some barbershop talk and just be talking and just saying anything, because people would challenge you. Like these people, their politics may be off, but they will challenge you, and you have to come with the facts. So that made me actually stronger. So in a kind of crazy way. But again, that's just me as opposed to the collective being stronger. I've been thrown out of classes, you know, things like that for arguing with the professors and things. But it was a great experience I had, and it was people like Malcolm that gave me the strength and the confidence to know that if you stand on the truth, you can come in there and you can debate anybody, as long as you stand on the truth and you know what you're talking about. So that was my situation.
Absolutely. So I see a lot of folks with HBCU experiences. I definitely want to encourage you to you know, submit your and everybody in the chat as well. It's almost done. The link will be up right after we get off air. That makes what I like.org. But anyway, let me pull this article up that came out in the Chronicle of Higher Education the other day, which I think is really strong. It's titled "The Pernicious Fantasy of the NikoleHannahJones Saga. Her success is not a collective victory for Black academics," by Jason England. Anyway, so one of the points here that he writes, the prevailing fantasy was that Hannah Jones's personal revenge was every academic's dream come true and a victory for Black academics in particular. But the Black academics I know harbor dreams of simply finding a job, ideally a stable one, without an overwhelming course load in a department with the least possible dysfunction. Forget about tenure. The statistics for Black faculty members achieving that coveted status are damning and depressing. Millions of dollars of funding from anonymous donors, the support of prominent figures, formidable philanthropic institutions and media outlets, a litany of job opportunities on which to fall back. That's a step beyond a pipe dream, so far from the realm of possibilities for most Black academics, and it's difficult to see any germane lesson to glean, and certainly no collective victory. So I'm starting here because I wanted to start with England's piece here, because he's not talking specifically about HBCUs, but the Black academic experience more broadly speaking, because one of the points I want to get to is that, again, the theme is that HBCUs are not a different world. That's so true. This broader picture he's painting here of the Black academic experience is exactly correct. It's horrific. The amount of Black PhDs is minuscule. The amount of Black PhDs or Black faculty with tenure is minuscule. The amount of freedom these Black faculty have to do actual, strong critical work is again minimal. We are often, whether at HBCUs or not, overworked. 4 course loads, 3 course loads. People, again, outside of academia, you have to understand most of the people you're familiar with, the Cornell Wests, the Skip Gates, the Dysons, whoever you see on TV, NikoleHannahJones, they are not teaching 4 classes a semester. They are not teaching 150 students a semester. They are not working without TAs and office assistants and research grants, and they're not working with these things. I should say, are not working.
Look at Manning Marable. I mean, he had a whole cadre of TAs and GAs, graduate assistants and people working with him. Not saying that he produced any good work with that, but look, I mean, his situation was a prime example of what you're talking about.
And rare. So again, whatever we may think of the outcome of the work, that's another level of the discussion. My own included. I put, I submit myself for criticism there as well. But my point is, whatever we think of anybody's work, it's that context that we have to start with.
And speaking of context, it really relates to that Frida-Lay, the plight of Black academics. It really relates to that Frida-Lay story that you're talking about. That they get on an inverse level, like they got their hours cut, but of course they get their money cut, and then they have to kind of work even more the different times of the day. They don't necessarily know what time they're going to come in and all of that. And the Black academics typically have to work more and don't get as much money, and then they don't get job security, just like those people don't get job security. Some of them don't even have health insurance. I didn't know that until talking to some people who weren't full professors. Didn't know that. So it's pretty much the same situation, because it comes from the same system, which is exploitation, which is capitalism, which is which needs to be destroyed and overturned.
You're right. And in fact, we should always, if not start there, be reminded of the fact that we are in this highly complex, capitalist, white supremacist, etc., imperial by design and function, and all these institutions are meant to serve that function for sure. So you are right about that. Let me know if I drop off again or just jump in. I see my signal dropping again. But anyway, but this part here I also appreciated from England's piece, as he writes the story.
And you dropped off there.
About NikoleHannahJones, a talented journalist who produced historical analysis. Okay. Am I back?
You're back now.
I can't even tell anymore.
You're back.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, no, it's really crazy. Like, I don't even see the signal. I mean, even when it shows, anyway, anyway, this, as he writes here, the story for me isn't about NikoleHannahJones, a talented journalist who produced a historical analysis that even her critics have to admit moved the needle of public discourse. It's about how the media framed her tenure struggle and how so many of us are so eager to substitute the latest cause celeb for real collective progress. It's about how social media protagonists confuse their own stories for social justice narratives. It's about how we understand Black uplift, progress, and renaissance at a time when those terms have been made as hollow and ubiquitous as a Twitter hashtag. That, again, says a lot about the context in which we're working here. And as I'll come to in a minute, that the HBCU does not, unfortunately.
Let me say something real quick on that point. And
yeah,
that
please,
is that within this system that we're talking about, this exploitative, this capitalist, this white supremacist, white terror dominated society, you're going to always have exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be a few people who are going to be able to, from the oppressed groups, who are going to be able to kind of, do okay or be successful. And unfortunately, what happens is what you just read, is that those people become almost like a symbol for a lot of our people that see this is a proof that we can make it. And so we live vicariously through the exceptional people who are exceptions to the rule, as opposed to looking at the rule itself, which excludes most of us.
That's it. Now this line, this sentence that I have here in purple, I highlighted it in a different color from my own memory for the purpose of making a point that what he says here about white universities, I think in a very real sense is mimicked at minimum by class within Black universities. And that is to say, as he writes here, white people can afford the titillating delusion of Black radicalism and Renaissance. They traffic in Black celebrity, intellectuals, and mascots, whom they promote to validate their own moral innocence as well as their bona fides as allies. It's almost literally the least they can do. They can also use these mascots to antagonize and browbeat their bad white counterparts. It's a tired act, but it makes for profitable theater. And my point here is that within the HBCU, the same type of thing happens. If we substitute white people for Black bourgeoisie, for instance, we could just read the same paragraph more or less in the same way. The Black bourgeoisie can afford the titillating delusion of Black radicalism and Renaissance. They traffic in Black celebrity intellectuals and mascots whom they promote to validate their own moral innocence as well as their bona fides as allies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they do the exact same thing at Black universities. They hire people for celebrity reasons. They have that don't necessarily have any academic credentials or track records or work, who don't even necessarily care about the students.
Yeah, I've seen it all the time. You see artists, and you know, we love hip hop and everything. And I ain't gonna say no names, but we know that there are artists and producers who are able to have teach classes at Ivy League universities, and they don't really have the credentials to do so, other than the fact that they are celebrities. I've even seen that here on a local level at one of the local HBCUs around here, where people were able to, certain media figures were given jobs at these places because of the fact that they had a certain, profile. So we see that as well.
This is the actual origin and what I was initially responding to last year from Karik Salil had posted this. But it actually didn't start here. These look like these two were I think added. This is where I saw it starting, and it was described as the faculty staff of a magical HBCU, of a magical historically Black college or university. I put all the links in the show notes, so you can take your time and look at them as but this is what was done initially, just a little bit to give you an idea. So they took a lot of famous Black celebrities and created these memes, which I thought were pretty good. It's not bad. It's not, it's cute, it's funny, it's a nice magical, as he said, it's a magical HBCU. The librarian, he's very patient, memorizes every student's name. This obviously we know who this is, but in this case, she teaches principles of magical law, object of every male freshman's desire, fashion icon, stop it, I'm old enough to be your grandmother, so on and so forth. Teaches modern demonology and exorcism strategy. On the dean's shit list, gives the threatening homework. You don't know jack about fighting demons. University president hates slackers and freshmen, stares disapprovingly, drives a flying Cadillac. So anyway, these are the, and I actually don't know who some of these people are. Like I'll check the chat in a second. Like I never, like I don't know who this woman is. Obviously we know who this woman is. This woman is, Jeffrey Wright, custodian, grumpy, rude, I don't know who this is. Teaches black magic, ritual religion, here teaches advanced transmutation, teaches astral projection. So anyway, this is what I was working. So when I saw this, I said, okay. I said, that's cute. But it did get me to thinking, about my own experience, my own tenure, pun intended, as a university professor, and particularly approaching now my 17th year at an HBCU. So I, and ultimately why I've been promoting and encouraging this Not a Different World project. So please do go to imixwhatilike.org and click this link. And if you are so inclined, if you've been a faculty, student, parent, staff member, with an experience with an HBCU, please check this out. There's a couple, really just one or two questions, and I'm asking you to tell your story. It's part of a longitudinal research project that I'm going to be working on probably for who knows how long. It's open-ended, so it just invites you to first to share whether or not the show Not a Different World influenced you, if you're a certain age, or maybe not influenced you to go to an HBCU. But ultimately, I'm just asking, what has your experience been with HBCUs? And admittedly, I'm looking to offer up some somewhat loving criticism that is of a space that promotes itself as pro-Black, inviting of Blackness, good for Black students, et cetera, and so forth, but doesn't always reach up reach that standard, doesn't always live up to that standard. All right, so okay, so my response. So again, my response to the magical HBCU is a more or less satirical look at, well, I should say a satirical look at a more or less real HBCU. What would they, what would these folks be doing at a real HBCU? So this is where I started. I didn't see the ones with Giancarlo Esposito and Blair Underwood, but this is what I thought where I started. So, and this, unfortunately for me, is almost a response to a very specific experience that I've had with one. But so anyway, as I described here, a former acting star who hates teaching and his students and is only there because he can't find regular work in Hollywood. Hates that he is at an HBCU and not at least at NYC Film School, cusses at his students and colleagues and cares nothing about tenure. So, and again, unfortunately, I'm not going to mention the name, and it's actually a composite of more than one experience, but there's one that I have in particular where I was very disappointed at this person's behavior and engagement with faculty and students. And again, because one of the problems that I think exists at HBCUs that is under discussed and not honestly, I think really talked enough about, is the fact that a lot of faculty, a lot of people that work at HBCUs are not there as a preference, as a first choice. And in this case, but because there are some lanes that open up at HBCUs that would not be open to them in other universities, they happily take it. And in this case, there were a couple people who have, significant careers outside of academia who are brought into academia because of their celebrity, their names, or their relationships to those in hiring positions. But they're not there because they're interested in Black students or teaching even in general. And in this one case I'm thinking of in particular, we even had words where initially at the first faculty meeting, I went over to him and I was, kind of in a fandom moment. I was like, welcome to the faculty. It's good to meet you and all this other kind of stuff. But even in that very first meeting, his attitude was very clear. The students are the problem. They don't care about education. Faculty aren't serious enough. They don't care. When I was at a white university, this was my experience, and I don't know why that. Blah, 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 blah. And to me, it was just clear, that there was no real interest in teaching. It was, almost like and certainly teaching at an HBCU. And then we even ended up having words over that as well, where he ended up defending some very reactionary decisions being made by those who had hired him. And was doing so from a position of ignorance, not having been at the university long, having been given a special invitation, a special paycheck, a special relationship, and then use that position to condemn the rest of us as if we were the problem. That is the rest of the faculty. And then in extending from there, that the students were the problem. And my point is always that it starts with the structure, and is that if resources are distributed a little better, if faculty weren't forced to teach 4 courses every semester, if our salaries were more appropriately placed, you would get a better performance. It just naturally makes more room for people to do better work. But him coming in teaching only a couple of classes with a special salary and all this other stuff, he had a different understanding of what was going on there and didn't really appreciate. So anyway, so that's why this is why I put that for this one here. Moving on. Here we have the librarian again, but in my version, he is a wasted genius presiding over a dwindling array of research database budget cuts, cares little because no one does real research there anyway, so he knows the library is ceremonial and is bothered to be bothered. Again, this is a composite of my experiences, not just at Morgan, but at several HBCUs, where, again, it's not that inviting dude. And in some cases is the wasted genius who is sort of housed away from everybody in the library. And I think with this understanding that the library isn't, the space for intense study and research, it's either social or not used at all. And it is oftentimes it does often feel like, or has at times felt like, not just from my own experience, but the reporting of students and colleagues that engaging some of the folks in these spaces is not the pleasant experience that it should be, and hence bothered to be bothered. Here we have the head of a previously non-existent program funded sufficiently by Wall Street so as to obscure a total lack of academic production. All students love her because their interaction is always superficial and never involves a grade or accountability. So again, composite, critique of a number of different people, and so this is, and I'm glad, Comrade Kwame posted. So this was something that was misunderstood in my reposting of this. These are not me being critical of these celebrities. So I'm not saying that in this instance, I'm not saying anything about the politics or the behavior of any of these people beyond. I'm just responding to the meme that was or the set of the thread that was initially created, where these famous folks were shaped or proposed as a fantasy HBCU, and I'm saying, well, this is what I'm suggesting is more likely the case. And this is, again, a composite of what I've seen in a number of different spaces where at times, and this is not, again, sometimes even I'm hypercritical and overcritical there and over-focused on the negative. The reality is that a majority of my colleagues, in my experience, whether I've liked them or not, or whether they've liked me or not, are actually, I would say it's a majority, that are actually interested and dedicated to doing a good job in the classroom, and they want to teach Black students, even the people I don't like, and certainly the ones that hate me. I think in some cases they do have an honest interest in helping Black students and wanting to teach Black students, et cetera, and so forth. And a lot of that good work is admittedly sometimes overshadowed in my own focus by some of the more troubling, traumatic, and horrific experiences. But anyway, but this is something that I've seen happen on a number of occasions, that, again, a previously non-existent program that attracts funding from some outside, often Wall Street connected entity, because it allows for that kind of, that liberal symbolic promotion of Black people, but in that sort of, oh, look, they can do these interesting little things. They can do little performance things. They can do little trivia things. They can do, look at how cute they are, but nothing really connected to heavy research lifting or, what would I think is still appropriate to consider, substantive academic contribution. None of that is the purpose or the interest behind it all. It's like, let's fund something that can be shiny, that we can put on a tour, that we can, use to recruit students, and maybe more resources that corporations can use to clean up an image. Anyway, that's sort of what I had in mind when I, but and again, but and I this has even been coached as a strategy in some cases, that all students love her because the interaction is always superficial and never involves a grade or accountability. That it is like when you don't have to when you don't impose a grade, when you don't have to demand heavy lifting from students, of course they're going to be more likely to like you and praise your work. Anyway, this is definitely something I relate to, and not only having experience on coming in as a younger faculty member, but something I see creeping up as a potential for me to become. The last radical of a bygone era who hasn't published much or in popular outlets, happy to be near retirement, having fought a good but losing fight, and will not be replaced. On a number of occasions, I've watched older faculty who have, again, they haven't hit those prominent academic heights in terms of publishing recognition, but who have been steadfast in doing that heavy lifting in the classroom, in the community, who are, again, truly committed to not only teaching Black students, but offering them sort of an introduction even into some of the brilliant radical, histories. But they're not replaced. In fact, the hirings that come after them are often with the idea that we don't want to replace this person. And then they do often have this attitude of, well, young brother, it's your turn. I did the best I could, and but I'm seeing that retirement. I'm out, and like I always imagine Keith David to be in real life, just have that kind of smooth, suave, cool kind of, I'm down for the struggle. Most people might not know who I am, but I'm in these community streets and classroom streets, so to speak. But I'm also happy to be out, and I'm out and will not be replaced. And this is I think this is an ongoing problem throughout the HBCU community. As a university president, hyper proud of this fundraising ability, and having been invited to Trump's White House, wants to move the HBCU beyond a Black university, and loves neo-colonialism. Now, this one might be as close to a critique of the real person as I might come to in this thread, because I kind of feel like this is where Morgan Freeman finds himself in real life. But yeah, we saw it during Trump's presidency when he invited all the HBCU presidents that he could get there, and whether they liked him or not, whether they believed him or not, we're happy to get that photo shoot. That's recruitment, that's fundraising, that's positioning myself for my next gig, all of those things. And yeah, they that neo-colonial relationship works for them. Where else would, again, particularly for the public universities, look at some of these salaries. Where else would folks make this kind of money? So if you got to, shake hands with a governor and a mayor and a this and a that, and get to the Trump White House, and especially if he's going to drop some more money, so be it. And then there has been, in some cases, this discussion and some concern around the discussion of how do HBCUs survive and compete when more options are available to attract Black students, and the traditional role of the HBCU is seen as dwindling. So there is this discussion of expanding the target audience for who will come to the university. But it was interesting. I noted that when Morgan and the state of Maryland was having its battle over University of Maryland duplicating programs that would have previously, in decades past, sent white students to Morgan State for these particular programs, thereby increasing some funding opportunities for the university, et cetera. I saw that it was noted that there were more white students at Morgan in the 70s than there are now, in part because they had to go there to get some of these special programs that weren't duplicated elsewhere in the Maryland system. So on some level, it may not be seen by some presidents that it's a walking away from history, but sort of a return historically to having more white students be there for funding, et cetera, and so on and so forth. So, but again, part of my issue with, and why I'm doing this wanting to do this project, is because there is the promoted image of what the HBCU is supposed to be, who it's for, and then there are these neo-colonial contradictions that, in all fairness, presidents are challenged with, because it's not enough to not grow. Why couldn't, for instance, a university stay at 3,000 to 5,000 students strong and just stay there, and give those 3,000 to 5,000 students everything, and give the faculty that work there everything, as opposed to constantly trying to expand, constantly trying to grow, which of course in this context means more is demanded of faculty with fewer pay, more classes, etc. More is walked away from or different from what is the projected symbol or image of what the university is supposed to do, and who it's there to serve. But it's, oh wow, is this true? Lincoln is 51% white now? Wow. Okay, that's interesting. But at the same time, you know, the other option is, of course, to close, which, you know, I don't know. Here Denzel for me is the choir director. Who's always smiling because the world loves and pays well for HBCUs depicted exclusively for their step shows, marching bands, and Negro spirituals. And this is definitely a pet peeve of mine over my time at Morgan, not just with Morgan, but I am constantly frustrated at how HBCUs are promoted by their marching bands, homecoming football, step shows, and choirs. Not that, you know, I love all of it. It's all important parts of the experience. In fact, I was just talking to my daughters who are slowly creeping towards that college age, that one of the best parts of being in a Black university environment are the step shows, are the marching bands, are the sort of Black cultural pieces of it. But at the same time, that is almost the exclusive, it feels to me, presentation and promotion of HBCUs. And what Morgan, I think, is known more about internationally than anything else is its choir. Though this is not a specific reference to Morgan or its choir or choir director. It is just sort of a composite of what I keep seeing happen in the HBCU space, that it's, you know, we're not talking about, you know, the latest, I don't know, whatever, more substantive and academic production. We're not talking about that component as much. It seems like, it feels like. So again, that's why this is a satirical look. This one is, I don't know who this sister is in real life. So I'm happy to look in the chat to get checked on or clarified on that, or, you know, explained or told. But this is what she evoked, or the picture in the original thread evoked from me, that this is the new hire, the genius, hyper motivated, loves Black people, teaches them well, and is just everything professor. But she's soon to be hired by a PWI or predominantly white institution who will pay her twice as much to teach half the classes, allowing her to be even more valuable to a smaller group of Black students. And again, this is one of my biggest pet peeves in my experience, and something I've seen almost endlessly. And it is, I think, if I think about it, more often a woman than it has been a man. That is the new hire who comes in sharp, you know, like I'm saying, you know, is everything, dedicated, skilled, productive, but can't be kept unless she, at a very early part of her career that is on the rise, makes a decision that I don't think anyone should have to make, which is to largely abandon your academic interests, your publication interests, your public intellectual interests and capability, and make them, you know, and sublimate them, if they exist at all, to, again, a 4-course load or more teaching load. And again, I cannot stress this enough. In the academic community, when you have 4 classes a semester, in addition to committee meetings, especially if you need to make tenure, especially if you're advising students, especially when you are just a popular faculty member who students want to talk to, who look for you, even when you don't teach their classes. these are the faculty you would want to encourage to exist. But if you're constantly having, and I've watched this, I've had on some level to do this myself, but I've certainly watched this in other people, particularly with women who I think have gone on, as far as I'm aware. Again, they're not, in some cases, not the radicals that I'm always looking for, but they have gone on to these kind of not pop culture, but more publicly popular intellectual scholars, and who have done some well, I would say for them, great work. And I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to diminish. I'm just saying politically in their space is great work. It's not, for some of us politically where we would want, but that's irrelevant. For the university, it should be what I would think they would want to encourage. But when you have to watch faculty tell students in the hallway who just want to gather to talk to the faculty member, not petitioning for a grade or a hookup or whatever, but who are just saying, look, I heard something interesting. Or the best part is when students you do not teach come to you and say, I heard about you from another student. I just want to rap with you for a few minutes about X, Y, and Z. That is, I'm telling you, when I've beamed with pride, that's it. Because that's the students who tell other students to talk to a faculty member outside of class, outside of a grade situation. That is the best. But when you have to, and you watch other faculty tell them, I can't, I don't have time. I got to go. I got a class. I got an advisement session. I got to sit in on another meeting. I gotta. It's so demoralizing. My favorite moments as a student, sitting in my favorite professor's offices way after class, bringing my lunch, walking with them. I mean, that was, one of my issues with one of the reasons why I was so personally whatever with Dr. Carr. I used to go to Howard University and just catch dude walking from one building to the next just to rap and hear him rap with other people. That's how much I was like, this dude is sharp. But to think that even in those moments, it was a quick walk, because he was even having to say, look, I don't have time. I teach at Howard University. So to think that when I was at Frostburg with a smaller Black community in a smaller, mostly white university, we had time. The faculty there had time to sit with us. When Dr. Turner in grad school showed up and did that one ceremonial drink half a beer with us in our buddy's apartment after, to talk with it, those are the most incredible moments. And to think how many of those moments get lost because faculty just don't have time or energy. And then on top of that, you're still expected to publish, to participate in conferences that aren't funded, by the way, often enough, or if enough. You don't have time. So what happens is, I've seen it. I can't even count how many times it's happened. This sister, one semester, maybe two, and she's out because she sees immediately. Not only do I not have time to do my work, but it's not appreciated here. I'm not paid, and then I'm not paid as well. I can literally get twice the pay to teach half the classes. And as I said here, have a more valuable contribution to a smaller group of Black people. So when we often hear from people who are not familiar with the situation, how can Black people not teach at HBCUs? How can they not care about their community? I would argue that they have more impact in a more substantive positive impact on the smaller groups of Black students they meet in PWIs than they do among larger pools of Black students at HBCUs, just because of that structural issue right there alone. And again, I think a lot of it could be fixed internally with a better redistribution, a better distribution of what admittedly are fewer resources at the university than in white universities. On the way to advocating for more funding for the university, I think salaries need to be at the top, need to be reduced, spread out, course reductions, and you get better faculty, better production, better student experiences, and maybe it would even lead to more money down the line because more students would come knowing they're going to get this fabulously, intense and rich experience. I don't know. That's just, so anyway, this one is a particular thing for me right here, because I've seen this happen over, and it is mostly women, I think. And then here's that same sister 20 years later, absent the move to the PWI. She will write her one meaningful publication after retirement. Her student evals or evaluations now largely contain complaints about her temperament and low energy. Again, something I've seen happen all the time. And the older I get and the more time I spend there, the more obviously biased in favor of this sister than I would have been some years ago. But in other words, I get it. I get it. That window. I do think there is that window where you are, for me, it's like you're mid to late 20s, before the marriage, before the children, and you got the degree, you're out, you're like, and it's super productive, super high energy, super ready to go, but you get saddled with the 4 classes, you get saddled with all the micro traumas that you suffer over time. And the more I'm learning, even with some of the lawsuits going on right now, the unequal pay for women, the abusive, relationships that women often suffer. And then, 20 years later, you didn't take that jump to the PWI. You didn't get that, you didn't hit that window and write that book at that moment and have it hit heavy. So you wait. And as was warned, I remember, man, Dr. Manifa Love Asante, shout out to her forever. She told me when I first got there at Morgan, this is what you need to do to make it. This is what you need to do to sustain yourself. And then she told me, watch out for that weight. Watch out for that weight gain. And sure enough, I was like, nah. And I remember, in fact, the one meeting we had, where she was warning me about that. I was eating this big bowl of Chinese food for lunch. And I remember as I put the fork in my mouth, I was like, I got this. That's not going to happen to me. And sure enough, it did. 10 years later, umpteen pounds later. But anyway, but I've seen this happen too. Then this sister retires, and then she does something, or maybe not retire, but they'll move on and take like a less stressful position at lower pay at another local university, and then they still do their more meaningful work and all that other kind of stuff. But the students that they get at the end of their career or at that moment, they're getting a different version of them. And of course, the students, it's not their fault, but they don't see her at the beginning, or me or others at the beginning. They see someone, who's been beaten down for a long time, and who's still, and again, 4 classes a semester every semester for me now, with 1 or 2 exceptions, going on, what is this, 17 years just at Morgan. That's a lot, man. That's just a lot. It's just a lot. It's too much. The new upper level administrative hire, her smile, friendly demeanor, and constant biblical references are performative veneers meant to deflect criticism of her bosses. And I could have even written criticism of her junior faculty. And this person I was thinking of, she's no longer with Morgan. But she breezed in, got the big check, constant biblical references, that, and that's why I'm always like, every time I start hearing people quote the Bible to me, I'm like, I start reaching for my wallet, like, and start looking for the exit, the escape route. Anyway. But yeah, it's almost performative. It's like, it's the assumption within the Black community. We're all believers. We're all in church. So, all the references I make, you'll understand. And then it's like a way to deflect, because how can you accuse someone of being shady if they're quoting the Bible? Now this is definitely, this more than any of them, this is definitely a direct reference to somebody for real that I encountered and debated. The head of political science, proudly from wherever Black Americans are not, wishes he was at Oxford or the London School of Economics. And I debated this dude years ago at Morgan. From one of the saints, the islands, one of the saints. And he sat up there during a convocation in front of the whole university and said that Black Americans are predisposed to crime and criminal activity because they are culturally deformed. And we in the Caribbean have a better culture and experienced slavery differently and responded better. And that's why you don't see us all locked up. So so I was like, hold up. I was like, what? So we had this debate. He wouldn't let me record it. I came with all this research, had everything ready to go. And he had no research. And in fact, said he didn't need to do research because he could just observe. And I remember saying, but you're the head of political science at a university and arguing in a debate that you don't need research because all you have to do is observe. I said, that is the most anti-intellectual, academic, most disingenuous thing I've ever heard in my life. But all I really remember from the aftermath is that the several students that we had in common said they thought that I was the problem because that I was too hostile, too angry in the debate. And I was like, and I was like, I got a right to be hostile. My people been persecuted. But I was like, how you gonna tell me I'm being hostile? This dude just said, anyway. So yeah, I was thinking this dude, and then, but the other thing, and the reason I put the reference to Oxford in there is that I remember him saying, he asked if he used as one of his self-referenced citations, in other words, self-referencing his own publication, he used an actual letter to the editor he wrote, the Financial Times. So he actually said, as I wrote in the Financial Times, da 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 da. But when you look up the citation, it's literally a letter to the editor, or like a comment, to the editor on the finance. But he promoted it as if it had been a commissioned or published article. It's shameful. It's shameful. I don't think he's there anymore, but it was shameful. That's who I was definitely thinking of him in that one. So I'll beg forgiveness from the universe if this is somehow unfair beyond my personal experience. But and it is, we do have to be real. I think there are problems of anti-soda sentiments in these HBCU spaces. And internally even, and this is not at Morgan that I'm getting this from, but throughout HBCUs, there is this underspoken issue of and claim even by some and views by some that there are these sort of cabal sounds, whatever, but there are these collectives of Africans from various parts of the diaspora who ascend to position, who use their position to help and benefit one another, and often enough against Black American faculty. That part I haven't experienced or seen necessarily, but it is an issue that my own experience and some others certainly suggest that we have some anti-soda issues, some issues with pan-Africanism to continue to contend with, and class, by the way. Yeah. But anyway, I don't know who this sister is either. So forgive me for that. But she definitely reminds me of the person I described here, from the Black community where her HBCU is located, fiercely loyal to her community university, great grant writer, and most radical acts are voting for Obama, Hillary Clinton, and then Biden. So I know a lot of these sisters here. I've met a lot of these sisters and brothers for that matter. But in terms of this pictures, what who again, I don't. They're certainly not enemies. They're not bad people. They're and as I said at the beginning, highly committed to the community, highly committed to the university, highly committed to their students, and are great at their jobs. Even they're great faculty, but they're not radical. That's all. Yes, it is. It is. But this is sort of my point, B. Akuma. This is exactly my point about the broader project of Not a Different World. That HBCUs are promoted often as the antithesis to the world. But they often replicate the problems in the world. And that's sort of the point I'm getting at. And where I would like to see them become more of microcosmic examples of a world we need to be creating. There's too much of the replication. So yeah, but that's actually my point. And again, too, I probably could have added that this sister ends up probably getting burnt out too, if she stays her career there. Because if aspirations certainly ever, move beyond the immediate local community, or maybe wanting better pay or whatever, you just can't stay. Definitely have experienced this. The admin office manager hired specifically to intimidate faculty not to make requests for even one single thing. And I admit I forgot this sister's name, but I stereotypically would suspect that, like, I think of her personality as fitting that. Like, don't even come in here. You need to schedule a meeting. I do it elsewhere. Send a memo, send an email, sign up on the sheet outside the door. You're here to pick up your package. I'm a mean mug you for a few minutes and make you wait for me to find it. And a couple of years ago, it was reported to faculty that the office manager was hired and was told that she works for the dean, not the faculty. So don't interfere with her. Anyway. Here we go. Trying to start her HBCU's first Black Studies program. Writes books on race and for major newspapers, which upsets admin, who invariably ignores and suppresses her work so as not to publicly be associated with it. Yeah, this is a composite of a number of women in particular. That again, it's that's interesting. Am I catching a theme that I didn't think of overtly initially? Anyway, like all universities, HBCUs want, on the one hand, they want public recognition for their faculty. They want certain public notoriety to occur. But if your notoriety is attached to race-specific critique, I don't think that's what's hot. It's like HBCUs want to be the Black space, but not the Black radical space that critiques what happens to Black people outside of that space. And again, it's that neo-colonial relationship. I mean, it is, again, if you are, even if I were president of an HBCU, either we would exist with the kind of what I'm talking about, a microcosm of what could be, where we wildly redistribute what little resources we get, which would dwindle, or I would have to, make concessions. And one of those concessions would be you don't want to walk into a meeting with a potential funding source and have the first thing out their mouth be a reference to some, major article or research project or book or documentary or whatever that is critical of the work that those funders do or are associated with or believe in. So yeah. And I've even been in spaces where like I remember this former dean, and this is my thing. He had just fired. I'll never forget this. He had just, well, technically he just didn't renew the contract, but it's really a firing. He just lets my man, Dr. Burroughs, go. And within like a day or two, stands up in front of a press conference promoting his school and claims credit for our work by saying we have some of the leading scholars of Malcolm X's history in our schools. So in other words, we'll take credit for it at this moment, but we're really getting rid of that underneath. We don't want that there. But anyway, and here we go. I think this is the end. I think this is the last one. Erykah Badu pictured here, but not, this is not a critique of Erykah, as I think people, or a few people thought I was doing. This is not personal to the people pictured. But here she teaches film and ethnomusicology, is well liked and famous, presents revolution as an aesthetic, and is promoted and well paid for this, precisely this level of emptiness. This is probably less of a composite than I would want to admit, but and specific to a man. But in general, I think this kind of stuff happens all the time. And I am kind of critical of that whole kind of thing. Like, you know, like the revolution is in the symbols. The revolution is in between the lines and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, but it's the stuff that's the stuff that is loved. You know, like if you're going to talk about revolution or radicalism or world change, it's got to be as a, you know, aesthetic. It's got to be in the sounds and in the ether, in the air, in between the line. It can't be, you know. Yeah, you might be right. You might be right. You might be right, Ricky. And this might be why I was inspired to think this way in terms of a picture of Erykah. But yeah, no doubt, no doubt. It's like, you're right. I mean, she does kind of, it's like, yeah, it's like, and then people can bring her around and be like, oh, she's so deep, you know, but anyway, so that was it. That was it. Again, that was what I was saying here in response to the original. This is cute. Now wait for me to write the correction with what these captions would actually read at today's real HBCUs. So that's it, everybody. Just wanted to clarify what I was unclear about and reposting them. Have a little bit of fun with it. It's all satire. It's all love. It's all love. And maybe I'll do another one that's more even comedically self-referential. That's that you know, we could have some you know, but oh wow, appreciate the super chat. My time at Tuskegee University was important for me, unlearning my suburban upbringing, but I will admit there wasn't much radical education, something I would learn. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of my students say something similar to that. Even some of the faculty I've talked to, like because there are some of us. When I first went to Morgan, it was a choice. Now, I didn't have, like, I'm not trying to suggest I had like a whole list of options and I could have been whoever, whatever, but I had a couple of choices. And the reason I picked Morgan was because it was an HBCU. It was in Baltimore. So I didn't want to be at an HBCU in like some, you know, some of them are in some like rural or other places that aren't nearby or not in areas I would want to live. So to me, it was relatively a perfect situation. It was not perfect in terms of pay, course load, etc. But anyway, it was. But there are others I've met who have real choices, who have at certain points of their career have had those real choices where they could have been at an elite white university or somewhere maybe in the mid-level, but that positions them with only a few courses. Like at one point, I think I could have gotten a job in like, was it Indiana? Somewhere like out there and I would have been like 2 classes, not a lot of money, but 2 classes, not a lot of expectation. And I'd have all the room to research and write and do whatever the hell I wanted. But that wasn't, you know, primarily geography wasn't possible for me, but other people with these options, they say, no, I want to be in a Black space. And they're not BPM style radicals. They just love Black people. They have that sort of basic, I want to be around Black people. I love Black people. I want to help Black people. Even if their definition of help is to get a job in a major corporation or to work in the Obama White House. But it's still like that's the decision. So they're not, and that for me is fine. I think that's great. And a lot of students feel the same way. They're saying, I went to white schools before, or I grew up in a white neighborhood or whatever. Or I just don't want to be around whites, or whatever. And that's great. And but no, they're not radical institutions. Wait, say that again.
But I was saying that he's what you explained is the same thing that happened with Kanye West when he's always complaining about white folks not accepting him because he wanted, he famously used to go on these rants on stage. I'm Walt Disney. I need y'all to express, the one, you don't have all the answers, Sway, that we went off on Sway and Sway was about to knock him out. But he
don't have an answer, Sway.
So that was a deal with him. But also NikoleHannahJones.
Although
I would say NikoleHannahJones too, just real quickly, she wanted that gig in North Carolina at UNC, and she settled for Howard because she knew she could always fall back on the Black. She can always fall back down. So there's another point to what you just made.
Well, I have no inside knowledge of this, and I haven't seen anything. But based on my own experience, it may also be that Howard came with an offer that far surpasses what even North Carolina would have brought, and far surpasses what other faculty there.
But the prestige of being at the UNC, because she wasn't looking for that at all.
No doubt.
Other than the fact that it was a brand name, and she wanted that position very badly, and she would have stayed there if they would have given her tenure.
No, that's right, and that was sort of my point about in that Twitter thread that a lot of the folks that end up at HBCU, but a lot of the Black faculty are. See, it's not even showing on my end that there's an issue.
Now you're back.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's what I'm saying. It's like it's crazy. It's not even showing on my end that there's a problem at all. So I have no idea what's going on. This is like a new and increasingly worsening problem. I don't understand. Anyway, I'll just keep going until I can't, I guess. But that the folks who end up at HBCUs, a lot of the faculty are not wanting to be there. They're not, they wish they were somewhere else. They think they deserve to be somewhere else. They think they're doing everybody there a favor, and they're miserable. And it reflects in their performance. It reflects in their attitude and their interaction with students. It reflects in their certain.
Oh, you froze again. You're freezing. But I think you're right. They want to be a big fish. They don't, they want to be a big fish in a small pond, but they don't have enough resources in the pond, and so they're frustrated there. It's like they rather be disrespected at a better plantation than getting a lot of respect in a smaller plantation, which would be the Black. It's like Malcolm said, they want to be. I'm the only one on my job. I'm the only one in my neighborhood. Or you're nothing but a house Negro. Which is what one a mayor down in Atlanta, I mean not Atlanta, but Alabama, called a council member in one Alabama town, called him called her a house N-word in front of some white council members.
We covered that on the remix yesterday and played the video and all of that. So just so folks know, our other guest, Sister Janelle, is here. I'm just begging her forgiveness and asking her to give me a little bit of more time here because
give me just a little more time.
Yeah, in part because the internet is not cooperating, and I want to get a little bit more to this, but just a few more minutes here. Coming back to this England article from the Chronicle of Higher Education, as he writes here, my Black friends and colleagues are far more cynical and frustrated. Their prevailing sentiment, let me back up, but Black mascots excite Black explains the vastly different reactions I get from friends. Oh, man. Damn. Sorry again, everybody.
You back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you back.
This is crazy. Okay. many of the white ones are eager and beaming when they discuss the Amanda Gormans and non-black minorities like Lin-Manuel Mirandas of the world. But my black friends and colleagues are far more cynical and frustrated. Their prevailing sentiment is that we have too much to lose to continue to indulge silliness and empty symbolism. They want collective improvement for Black Americans, not an invitation to root for a metaphorical hero in the latest media-generated movie. They want tangible change, not abstract renaissance. Now, see, this is the frustrating part for me. Even at the HBCUs or in my own personal experience, witnessing so many committed, talented, loving faculty who give a damn about the Black community, who want to work in a Black community, who want that Black collective change, have their careers destroyed, marginalized, ruined in some cases, in favor of celebrity types, of some promotional campaign, of some sort of some sort of other sort of symbolic move. And you see people get written up in newspapers. They get get invited to the White House in some cases, representing these HBCUs and realizing and knowing underneath it. So somebody put out on Twitter the other day a tweet tagging me and Dr. Burrows, Todd Stephen Burrows, who used to be my colleague at Morgan State. We literally shared joining all for a couple of years. It was the most fun I've ever had at a job. While all these other things might be going wrong around us, to be able to work with one of your best friends right next door, with some other colleagues, it was fantastic. He was removed. He could have adjusted himself for sure, but instead of courting this nationally known, leader of Black journalism, he was removed. And yet on Twitter the other day, somebody, not knowing any better, tags me and Dr. Burrows and Morgan State saying, it's like with that mind blow emoji saying, Morgan State gave us both Dr. Burrows and Ball. And I'm sitting there saying, that's not what happened. In fact, the dean that I was just asked to interview about fired Dr. Burrows, wouldn't renew his contract, and then went up gave a press conference to announce the new school of journalism and took credit for our work.
Wow.
While cutting him on one end, went up there on the podium and said, we have some of the finest scholars producing work around Malcolm X in our school. And then he proceeded to have a meeting with me in which he said, Dr. Ball, you could be our Dr. Cornel West or Dr. Dyson, but not in my school.
And besides, and I was like, what is that? And besides, you would need an Afro wig anyway. So I mean, I don't know if that would work. How that would work out. I mean, actually, it might work for you, man. You would look a lot like what's the brother Derek Hamilton. Y'all would kind of anyway.
Damn it with this internet. Anyway, so anyway, that just little things like that, man.
Yeah, but
I continue to struggle.
I just remember one of my favorite professors when I was at Hampton, Dr. Beverly John. May she rest in peace. She rise in power. She passed about a year or so ago. She ended up having to leave. One of the great professors. I mean, she was a sociology professor. She ended up having to leave and go to Chicago and taught until she passed away, I think about a year or so ago. But she was a good one. But then to the flip side, going back to your kind of white ally kind of thing, even on the faculty, that's true, because there was one white professor who was also a sociology professor, and he used to bring all kinds of really good information. And he and I used to debate here and there on some stuff, because he was white, so I still had to check him on certain stuff, certain takes he would have on Black nationalism. He didn't really care much for, but he was able to say all kinds of radical stuff about Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who was one of the white founders of Hampton. He would talk about his campaigns in Hawaii, which were good. It was some good information. Talked about how he was instrumental in decimating, that population, the native population there, and taking over and all of that stuff. And he talked about Lincoln and his workings with the trail, with all kinds of different things, atrocities that he was a part of that people don't talk about. And he was able to say all those things. He was able to be, as a white man, he was able to be radical at an HBCU, yet the black professors who were trying to be radical weren't allowed to do that. So I just found that to be interesting too. And the black people who would argue with me would say, would turn around and say, but did you hear what his name was Dr. Rosenthal. Did you hear what Dr. Rosenthal did? I said, I said the same stuff, but when I say it, it's a problem. But when he says it's okay. It's like white boys doing as well as success. If I start doing it well, it's suspect, as most deaf would say.
That's it.
Yeah, I seen Babe say.
First of all, shout out to Kalanji in the chat and welcome Cognac Turner
Cognac.
to I was going to say, is that Dr. James? Is that Dr. James? His alter ego, JT. Shout out to Dr. James Turner, man, and his family. I hope he's doing well, recovering well. Anyway, I love that man. Love that man. Anyway, just real. First of all, that's another aspect of this that we'll be covering in this project eventually, this HBCU project that I'm building, the white faculty and administrator at HBCUs. They are often more vocal, more feeling of their privilege and of the sort of rights that they know they as faculty are supposed to have, and are often more vocal, even in the correct political way than many black faculty in some cases, which is also, but they are also just as guilty as others, as I've been talking about, of feeling like I don't deserve to be here and I'm doing you all a favor, and I really wouldn't want to be here if I had a choice. But anyway, but just quickly wrapping up with
this England professor
piece.
That used to say just that. She used to say just that, and she used to also say that the work I'm having y'all do, y'all are helping me get my PhD. She had a master's.
Yeah, no question.
Y'all are helping me get my PhD. She was straight up. But I kind of respected the game. I respect the game when you just straight up like that. I may not like it, but I respect it.
Absolutely. But as England points out here, this sort of praise for the spectacle and for the symbolic achievement of one that stands in for all of us. As he writes here, this has created a bottleneck effect among black public intellectuals who are competing to make the same obvious points about the most accessible issues and to argue passionately against the most extreme foils. It incentivizes shamelessness, self-promotion, and shallow discourse. He's fallen by the wayside. For example, Patrisse Cullors, Black Lives Matter, blah, 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 blah. The black public intellectual class was nowhere to be found. Now, I highlighted that line because Brother England just needs to expand his own media range and get over here to Black Power Media, because we were all over the Patrisse Cullors issue. Last Open Intellectual, I had something to say. I believe it came up a couple times on Renegade Culture. I believe it even Dr. Sundiata talked. So we were all over that joint. So Brother England, expand your range beyond the Chronicle and some of these mainstream outlets, and you'll find those of us out here doing some of the work that you're talking about, which speaks to the very point I'm getting at, that he's getting at, that there are people in these spaces who are suppressed and not given attention, and those of us who are not willing to do what he was just accusing many others in black public spheres spaces for doing, don't get recognized for it. Anyway, and I think I'm freezing up again. Or is that okay? Anyway, but as he says here, to be clear, I don't think NikoleHannahJones is a bad faith actor or grifter, but the media's framing of her story illuminates how ideas become secondary to symbols and how that formula is replicated by people who are bad faith actors and grifters. He goes on to give this Jay-Z example when he was working with R. Kelly, in the album, about the fantasy of the Black Renaissance for the rest of us, which is basically what Jay-Z's whole career is. But then he ends here, or I'm going to end here with England's piece on this point here. Wait a second, just real quick. This is sort of my point also about HBCUs and Not a Different World, that the popular commercial projection of HBCUs often creates this misunderstanding as well, where the media frames HBCUs in a way that illuminates the same issue of secondary symbols being promoted what is actually happening on the ground. But as he says here, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine in academia passed along a rambling, narcissistic social media post from one of these very public voices who bemoaned the lack of, quote, real niggas in the academy. It struck both of us as especially warped because the academy, for all its issues, is home. Am I frozen again?
No.
Okay, is home to many of the realest Black people I've ever encountered, deeply principled, underpaid, overextended, and dedicated to the nuts and bolts of scholarship for which they'll rarely, if ever, be rewarded. And that is absolutely the case at HBCUs. There are some of the realest faculty, committed people that you would ever meet, some who again have chosen at great sacrifice to their personal career and bank accounts to stay at these institutions because they want to work with these students and in these communities, but they're punished for it. Anyway, and again, I want to publicly beg Sister Janelle for a few more minutes because there was this other piece that came out that is specific to an HBCU that I just want to quickly mention before we move on. The open letter from, we're not really sure, anonymously from a Howard faculty member, an open letter to NikoleHannahJones. And the short of it is, I won't go through it right now because it basically says everything I am saying everything it says. That while you are being welcomed in amongst all this fanfare, while you are being touted and praised for coming to the so-called Mecca and for your work at the 1619 Project, that faculty at Howard University and many other, I would argue, at many other HBCUs are not well treated. So as they list here, just some of the issues that faculty actually have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Each year, Howard professors work as lecturers and must working as lecturers, that is, which is what most faculty at HBCUs and others are suffer at. They're not full professors. They're not tenured faculty. They're not even necessarily associates or assistants. They're working as lecturers or adjuncts, and they're being abused and paid by the course without benefits, without, that is the increasing. That's criminal. It is criminal, and it's the increasing trajectory of not only all universities, but HBCUs included. While I believe the president at Howard makes well over $1 million, the president at Morgan is last I saw well over 500,000. They're making money is being made, particularly by those at the top. But at the bottom, as this author says here, each year Howard professors working as lecturers must reapply anew for our jobs, complete the employment application again, submit the vitae, act like we've never met. Every single year we get a letter during the spring semester reminding us that our jobs are over as of May 15th. Yeah. I mean, that's just abusive. Yeah, go ahead.
And we have to remember that HBCUs are really not, they may be historically Black attended, but they're not really necessarily Black run and operated. I was just looking at the board of trustees of Howard University. They got a lot of Black faces, but they got somebody here, managing partner at Fairview Capital, chief executive officer at RLJ Lodging, financial officer at Citigroup. Another person here, Barry Henry and Associates, Boyd Cosmetic Surgical, Sweet Green, somebody from CNN, somebody from PepsiCo, somebody from a realtor, and on and on. So you got people that are all invested in capital, which is about exploitation and capitalism, quite writ large, and it's about exploitation. And so that's why the president can make $1 million, and then they can string people along at 7 years at a time without giving them tenure and using them up just enough and then throwing them away, or making them try to renew their tenure or reapply for tenure, which is nonsensical. To do it every year, they have to reapply to. I think that article, that letter said that they had to reapply every year for their job, which is nuts. Yeah. And some of them didn't realize that they got the job back until they looked at the syllabus for the next year to see whether or not they were teaching the course, which is crazy. But we see why. When you look at the board of trustees, you'll see why. Lumina Foundation and others. It's just all kinds of capitalists and snakes and buzzards who are kind of running this thing. So that's why we're seeing what we're seeing there.
Yeah, and just like everywhere else, the HBCU is looking for can get, and often goes to the most conservative commercial outlets to get it. And then the reaction is, if you want more money, you have to attune your focus, your hiring, your politics. We're doing the fund, so anyway, unfortunately, HBCUs is sort of the broader point. They're not really, from my experience, and that's why I'm inviting others. Shortly after we go off the air today, mixwhatilike.org. I'll have the post there. I'm inviting anyone with any HBCU experience. If you're as a parent, student, faculty, admin, share your story, answer the questions. By the way, some of the stories I'm getting are positive. I'm not trying to say it's all bad. But I am trying to say that it's not any different than the rest of the university experience at its core, particularly for those who work there.